We set up a kind of a little command center there. So the infamous picture of the White House in the sit room, we were on the other side of that VTC with Bill McCraven in theater in Afghanistan, Panetta, at Langley, and then the White House. And ability to pull off that event in secrecy and under the cover of night, undetected, to the time that when the helicopter settled on the wall and, literally the wheel caught just right, or that thing would have been in flames. And, some of the operators that I do part of the team quite well that were a part of that, and how they were able to respond and conduct what they trained for down in North Carolina.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today's Combat Story is with our first Navy Vice Admiral, Mike LeFever, who spent 38 years in uniform supporting the U.S. national security apparatus across the world. Rising from an Annapolis wrestler to a surface warfare officer, Mike was selected to command a strike group, would serve at the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan as the head military officer during the Bin Laden Raid, and finished his military career as the Director of Strategic Operational Planning at NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, within the Office of the DNI. Mike has gone on to write a book about leading through crises titled End Game First, a leadership strategy for navigating a crisis, and since leaving service has stayed very busy with roles as a CEO for a cyber and tech company, senior advisor and mentor at the McChrystal Group, performance ambassador and speaker for Liminal, Collective, and Arena Labs, works on the Cipher Brief with our friend of the show, Glenn Korn, and more. This is a really insightful and deep dive discussion with an incredibly senior, accomplished, yet thoroughly humble leader, and I hope you enjoy his sense of humor, honest talk, and experiences at the highest levels of both global affairs and military strategy as much as I did. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Thanks so much. This is going to be awesome, Ryan. Looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to this. So we have a mutual connection here. Glenn Korn, who many will know as a legend in the CIA community, 30 years in the government, mainly with the CIA, but also state and the Army. You two know each other. And I thought it might be interesting for people to hear, like, what was it like working with Glenn or just being around him? How did you all meet?
Yeah, Glenn is, like you said, he's kind of a legend in the service and just a great American. He was with me when I was stationed in Islamabad. I was there from 8 to 11, and we just had a great time. The chiefs of station, renowned figures within the agency that later became the head of ops, Frank Archibald, John Bennett, and others that are just, amazing people. Jeff was the deputy there, and he had in his room a Nerf hoop that he'd always tempt. You'd go up to talk to him, but you'd had to play, a game of horse or mule or whatever the case may be. And of course, that's all he did all day long was sit there at his desk on his couch, throw it. So nobody would ever beat him. I don't even think Glenn did, and that was always, and we'd always have these just crazy meetings of opportunities and discussing counterterrorism operations with a Nerf basketball hoop in the background playing ball.
The things you don't see in movies,
Yeah, I don't know who would play our parts if they ever created those types of scenes.
I love it. Okay. And then, I mentioned just before we kicked off, some people will be listening to this, some will be watching. For those who are listening only and can't see, you've got a very interesting backdrop, obviously with a storied career yourself in the military. I don't know how you decide what goes up on your walls, but I assume what's up there has significant value to you, is of significance. So you've got a really cool framed plaque with looks like an award, and then an American flag up there, not your typical American flag. What's the meaning here? Yeah,
interesting. We'll get into the later on the plaque. It was an award for an event that I participated in for the earthquake relief in Pakistan, and it was given an award by then General Musharraf, then President Musharraf.
Wow!
It was the highest award they've ever given any foreign military. It was called the Halal Qadi-Azam. It's almost embarrassing to talk about. It's called the Order of the Great Leader for Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. that I was awarded for the events that took place, that I led the Joint Task Force for 7 months after this storied earthquake in 2005. It's quite an honor. So that's the plaque. The flag is an interesting one. I help with the Station Foundation, which is a foundation out in Bozeman, Montana, that helps Joint Special Operators as well as CIA folks in reuniting with family, Gold Star families, and the like. And one of the journeys is in the transition program. Took pieces of my uniform, you shred it up, you blend it, you soak it, and you put it through this shredder, and then you form this mold.
Interesting.
That dries, and then what happens? They put a stencil over it and paint it the American flag. So it's a reminder of where we all came from, like yourself, an incredible storied career, a service and opportunities of serving your nation. And then as you transition, kind of this is a reminder of what it is and what we serve for and how we honored that oath. So
what a special idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so that's why that has a, kind of a unique, special place.
Jeez. So we'll get into, I know we'll dig into more on both fronts here, and I'm going to transition in just a moment to kind of how you grew up and found your way to the service to begin with. But I just want to, I have to ask, and we had kind of exchanged notes on this just as we were preparing, but I spent 4 years in Pakistan as a kid. My dad was the political officer at the embassy in the early 90s during the Gulf War. We got evacuated out. He stayed with the skeleton staff. I remember living out in F7, going to the embassy, spending all my days at the pool, at the club there, the crazy Marine Corps detachment and their events. But I have to say, and I went to Afghanistan actually Christmas of 2007, and I think you just mentioned 08 to 11 you were there, and obviously Benazir Bhutto gets assassinated in that time frame. Arriving there around that time had to have been significant, and just having been there before even.
Yeah, it was crazy times. I was there in 5 and 6 for the earthquake. And then I say no kind deed goes unpunished. I got sent back to be the senior mill rep and thought it was a 1-year assignment. 3 years later through the Bin Laden raid, which we can talk about as well. But that time was just crazy. The events, Benazir Bhutto, Ray Davis incident, the attacks downtown after Kiani at this compound. I mean, right outside, the general's getting murdered in a mosque right across from his compound. Ray Davis, Bin Laden, the horrific floods. I mean, Pakistan defied all possibility of what was going on and the events, and being there at that crazy time, and then the surge in Afghanistan that caused and so deconflicting that, controlling some airspace, the Carter, the working. It was just,
let alone India on one side that takes up its own.
Because Pakistan thinks that's the existential enemy. They didn't even think about the terrorist stuff that's ensuing in the Fatah. Now it's biting their the hand that fed them, and it's a fascinating place. And I'm still involved, which is kind of neat. I get asked to be a part of a U.S. delegation for strategic dialogues and track 1.5 and 2 talks, and so meeting with them and having these discussions of folks that I served with over there is quite an honor and quite interesting to hear the reactions and get insights.
Well, if we rolled the camera back and you were, I don't know, 15, would you have imagined you'd be here? Was this what you saw coming?
Never at all. I had a class. I went to the Naval Academy, and we're coming up to date myself on a class we call another link in the chain. And so I'm talking to these candidates that are about ready to start almost 50 years after I started. And and here I am standing there as a 3-star admiral and saying, somebody would have told me, because I think I got to the academy. I tell people on a wrestling scholarship, the wrestling coach saw me and kind of like, hey, do you ever think of the Naval Academy? And I said, yeah, sure. Started filling out forms. Before I knew it, I was at the academy. But oh my gosh, if someone would have told me that, hey, you're going to be a surface warfare officer, in charge of ships and people, and then you're going to transition to this crazy world of counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, be 700 miles from salt water as an admiral in the Himalayas, briefing the president, and then later, in the White House sit rooms with the National Counterterrorism Center. I would have looked at them and said, you need to take your analysis test right now. You should think about a new career, because that expect the unexpected is kind of the motto of the day. I give talks on it because who would have ever guessed?
Was it really just wrestling? Like, it wasn't family focused, or like, I want to follow in somebody's footsteps?
Yeah, my dad was enlisted in high school. His high school graduation is in his sailor uniform, in Pennsylvania. He grew up in Pennsylvania, and then went and served in World War II after the war, got out, and, was in industry. And I had other relatives that served in the service in the war, lost a couple uncles in the war. But there wasn't a real strong, but, always attracted me, being able to serve. And so it was quite an honor.
Just out of curiosity, let's say that doesn't happen. The wrestling coach doesn't come along. What do you think you would have done?
I was looking at other schools, and, like you, probably in high school, is like, well, this sounds good. I want to do that. And I'm going to do the, I thought I grew up in southeast Pennsylvania and then northeast. I was a popular kid. My dad worked for Hershey's ice cream company. So we had a freezer in a basement. So after all the T-ball games or whatever, everybody would come to my house. But it was like near one places was in Bethlehem, near Lehigh University, a big engineering. So I thought, hey, maybe this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But holy smokes.
And then why surface warfare coming out of the academy?
Well, it's funny. I think I always wanted to be a pilot, but my eyes went bad, and we didn't have LASIK and stuff then. Then I really liked, kind of the warfare aspect, whether it was the SEALs, whether it was Marines. And then I thought, well, geez, my eyes are bad. That probably won't be helpful, in the field. So I kind of said, hey, I always loved being on ships. I was an oceanography meteorology major at the academy. And I said, hey, this would be fun. I want to be on cruisers and destroyers, or, ships and go to sea.
And now some of the things you do today, sir, and there are many, as we joked that you have failed retirement so far, but some of them are, I think, delivering insights on leadership and experience and career growth. Maybe, and some of the things we've teed up to talk about don't even touch on your surface warfare time. So I'm curious, what do you draw on from the multiple ships that you were a part of or led that you still use today as kind of leadership lessons, or you try to pass on, or you found were very useful for you?
A great question, because, we're all process of our experiences. And I've had some really unique experiences, out of the academy and different jobs in different departments of the ship, to lead to always having an opportunity to grow and increase your skills. And then had the luxury of being in command and of a ship, of a squadron, of strike groups, and then joint task forces. Just, incredible luck. But some of the basics, kind of like, as you pilot, that crew chief that came in and goes, hey, sir, let me take care of you. Let me teach you how to be a leader. Yeah. I can remember that, I had a command sergeant major for my, senior list in Pakistan. I just loved the guy, but, command master chiefs and chiefs, that helped shape me to be the leader and officer, and learning how important it is taking care of people, because then everything takes care of itself. That mission focus, that idea of, and then having great mentors. My first ship, both the commanding officer and the executive officer, the second in command, both went on to be 3 and 4 stars.
Wow.
and I think, you're shaped by the leadership you had, and you learn a lot from great leadership. You also learn from folks that weren't so great leaders about maybe, hey, this is what you don't want to do when you're in an opportunity to be able to have the great honor of leading these great men and women that serve for you.
How long do you spend on surface warfare before you, not that it's a career change, but, kind of going, as you said, 700 miles from water. How long are you doing that before you kind of make this pivot?
Wow, probably almost 20 some years. The progression, to get there and then make flag and then have a strike group. But during those times, I touched in and out of special operations because of different events I was participated in and friends and the like. But the surface warfare, it really took this, kind of right turn when I got pulled off by strike group to lead the earthquake relief effort in Pakistan. It was kind of crazy.
Why did that happen? And how does that happen, right? I mean, this is a global kind of escalation event, emergency.
Yeah.
Who calls you and says, hey, can you just stop what you're doing and come do this?
Yeah, it was funny, working up for deployment. I had a unique opportunity. It was an expeditionary strike group. So think of it as 5,500 Marines and sailors, probably 6 ships, a couple submarines, an air wing, a Marine expeditionary unit, a support group, and the like. And so in rehearsals, we're practicing to go to the CENTCOM Middle East area. General Abbazade was the general at the time. And I'd interact with his staff, to make sure we were planned for all the right scenarios that we could do. We went over, we were part of a big exercise called Bright Star off of Egypt, the largest multinational exercise in the world. Marines doing landings. I'm talking to General Abbazade on the shore, and I'll never forget the discussion. He goes, hey, Mike, what do you think the rest of your deployment's going to look like? I go, well, sir, you're really in a shitty neighborhood. I mean, you talk about Yemen, you talk about Pakistan, you talk about the Iraq war that was going on, piracy, humanitarian relief in Sudan. I said, there's plenty of things that I think are going to keep us occupied to be able to do this. And he said, and he looked at me and he smiled as we were watching the Marines do a landing with the Allied forces on the beach. And he says, you know what, Mike, it's possible you're going to end up doing something you completely never expected. And I kind of laughed and I go, yeah, sure, boss. When he called me, the boss, through Fifth Fleet Commander, Admiral Nichols called and says, hey, Mike, you watching the TV? And we were going through the Straits of Hormuz. The Iranians were playing their usual games for ships going through, kind of harassing the ship.
So you're probably not watching TV, is what you're saying.
Well,
this is going on.
I'm on the strike group. I'm on the flagship. And so, I saw something of, he says, what do you think about the earthquake in Pakistan? Well, the initial images were a couple buildings rumbled in Islamabad. They hadn't gone up in the area. I said, yeah. He says, hey, keep going. You offload your Marines to Fallujah to support General Casey in the election in 2005. The famous one with the ink, if you remember. So my Marines are going into Fallujah. I'm ready to go up and offload them off the ships because they were considered a theater reserve force. I was already doing some stuff up in the area of the oil distribution and piracy and some other stuff. So he says, but hey, continue. We might use your ships later on. They said, hey, great. About 6 hours later, he calls. He goes, Mike, pack your bags, bring a handful of staff. When you sail by Bahrain, fly ashore. We're going to brief you up. You're going to go lead the earthquake relief effort, do the assessment, lead the earthquake relief effort for the U.S. General Abbazade thought you'd be the right guy to be able to do that. And the ambassador, Ryan Crocker, incredible career diplomat.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of said, hey, this is a great opportunity to help a friend in need. And 24 hours, within 48 hours of the earthquake, now, in hindsight, it ended up as a 7.6 shallow earthquake. 80,000 people died, 178,000 injured, 3.5 million people homeless. It's in the foothills of the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush. And I show up on this airfield that looked like something out of Star Wars. I mean, people from all over trying to help, try to get up the affected area. And I show up at the embassy the next morning and in an area where, what are you doing here? Why, but Ryan Crocker, just amazing, kind of, hey, we need you and need your support. And it grew to a 1,500 men and women task force, 2 hospitals, 30 some helicopters, airlift, 4 refueling stations, amazing amount of tonnage that we did with Chinook helicopters and so forth for 7 months. That was probably personally and professionally one of the most rewarding experiences. I tell people, here I studied for urban renewal in a different sense. Here I am building and restoring houses and homes in this devastated area that never trained for, never expected.
Yeah.
So I land and I'm talking to the ambassador and the phone rings and he goes, it's General Abbazade. And he goes, hey, Mike, remember our discussion on the beach? He says, good luck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Just a quick word from our sponsor, NordVPN, and we'll get right back to this combat story. As many of you know, my background in the Army and USG makes me a bit paranoid when it comes to my online profile. I've been doxxed by some unfriendly groups and really don't want to give adversaries anything they can use against me. This is why I use NordVPN. For me, I use NordVPN when I'm looking at more sensitive data online like banking and financial information and when sharing tax-related info. I also use NordVPN on my phone or laptop when I'm traveling, at a hotel, a coffee shop, on public Wi-Fi to keep prying eyes off my business. What's great is that NordVPN has the fastest VPN in the world, so you don't get the buffering and other challenges when you need it, and it's got threat protection features that keep you safe. Lastly, I've used NordVPN to get access to shows and information that I otherwise would not have been able to, including for my kids when we were abroad. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/combatstory. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. And now, back to this combat story.
So
That's
amazing,
interesting.
amazing, experience. And I say that the kind deeds goes unpunished. My strike group believes and I'm there. I'm extended. So my deployment lasted almost a year because I was in Pakistan. I became the face of the U.S. relief effort, heading up with the multiple interagencies and support to be able to provide the aid and assistance that we did. And then we pulled out. My ships were already back. The Marines and so forth got back and then got assigned to a job in the Pentagon or, doing personnel management. And then I get a call. I was about ready to change jobs. I get a call. It goes, "Hey, your name came up in the tank today with the chairman." He says, "Where are you going?" I go, "I have no idea." And a while later he calls. He goes, "Pack your bags. You're going back to Pakistan." I go, "What?"
Wow.
So
sir, when you get the call, hey, you're here to do all these other things, and then, hey, in a day or two, hop on a plane and come on out to Bahrain, and we're going to completely switch. From your perspective, I mean, you're talking 5,500 people. Who are you tapping to leave in charge, and also not cannibalizing all of the great talent that is there to make that kind of in-moment decision?
Yeah, I had a great deputy who was a Marine. It was this unique command and control structure. So I had a Marine deputy colonel that I kind of left the task force with. And later I brought into Pakistan to help me out. But I took a handful of folks to accompany me in to do the initial assessment. A Navy SEAL, a Navy EOD officer, an engineer, and to be able to do the initial assessments. And then an intel and a security guy, kind of an ops guy that kind of made up this eclectic team that, I'd worked up with, and the staff knew how we operated. And so I pulled 6 or 7 people out of that. And then the strike group, because when Marines went ashore, they chopped to their commander. And so then I had another chief of staff who was a great individual that helped maneuver the ships and put them in positions as we were spread out around the Gulf to do the different missions we were assigned. And so I tried to do both hats. I kept involved. I had probably 7, 8 different emails and computers that I took with me to kind of stay connected. But at some point it became, full-time at the Joint Task Force Operation Lifeline, that it became known to help responsible for saving thousands of lives. It was pretty unique.
How did you try to attack that problem? And this has to be so rare in somebody's career that they're pulled to do something so different with no real training and no time to consider it, right? So how did you approach it? And I'm sure you use this when you're talking to people about leadership. And then also what made it so fulfilling?
Yeah, it was unique. I after I retired, I gave back, taught other Joint Task Force commanders, what to expect, and standing up JTFs and Keystone and Capstone, which helps talk to senior SIS and SES, and as well as senior enlisted and generals and admirals. It's kind of building the aircraft in flight. I mean, it really was. It was kind of do initial assessment. And I think it goes back to your original question, is those experiences that we had growing up in leadership, whether it was sports or activities or the ships that I was on, to learn those foundational skills that became the foundation of who you are and how you lead, and to be able to do the assessment and bring this eclectic group. I got people just came from all over. I had a unit from the Air Force, a CRG, a recess group that ran the whole airfield with they could do incredible work of offloading and unloading and sorting and distribution of all the supplies that were just heaped on the airfield in Islamabad, the single airfield at Benazir Bhutto Airport. It was a mess until these guys showed up. I got a command and control unit from Bahrain. It was a command post out of tents that we lived on the airfield for months. Right. Brought in the Australians came, NATO came in to be able to support. I had a MASH hospital, a Navy Marine Corps hospital that eventually flew in. Army logistics folks that helped rig the sling loads. Helicopters that flew in from Afghanistan that the before were getting shot, and I had American flags on them, covering some of the bullet holes as they're delivering supplies. I mean, wow. It's just this kind of an eclectic kind of like, here you go, and I love because of the ambiguity and chaos, but this was and living in this uncertain environment. But it was, providing basics and bringing people together and experts, knowing where you're, as any leader, knowing where your strengths and where your weaknesses are and making sure you're surrounded by those great people. And then I think as leaders is creating an environment to allow people to really, really excel. That, I remember, on the ship, one time I was micromanaged and I really didn't like that. And then I was given a lot of leeway, and that was almost too dangerous.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I learned quickly, like, man, if you have really smart people, the best thing is just give them broad guidance and kind of give them commander's intent, as we call it, and kind of let them go. And, but what made it so rewarding was interacting with so many different, and it was my first time really truly in an embassy environment that I had no experience in, and understanding the interagency and all those dynamics and all the personalities. And then in this eclectic world of humanitarian relief and disaster assistance, working with UN and World Health Foundations and learning more about what it is about, making sure that you have the right water and the right environment and the right, and how animals and microeconomics in these villages and tehsils across Pakistan, and how to be able to provide that aid and assistance. And then to reflect back to see how rewarding it was to be really responsible for saving and helping so many lives. And then the care of the people, you'd be out in the middle of nowhere, putting together some lean-tos for some makeshift shelter. And the people of Pakistan were so warm and giving. Like, their homes are destroyed. Families, many of their family members died. It would happen on a Saturday morning, kids at school, and the structure of their buildings. And yet here they are trying to offer you tea or some sense of food as some gift for thanking you. Helping them build their life back, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it gets, I don't know, I guess it gets into your system.
Yeah.
When you're seeing that aspect of life, and caring for folks and being responsible and having the wherewithal to had that much impact was really, really rewarding.
Might be a naive question, just having never been at the stratosphere you're at, but we just interviewed H.R. McMaster, and I just read his most recent book, and I think there's this great leader, and it's hard, I think, when you've never been at the level you have been at. I think we would assume that a lot of the political jockeying games, personalities go away, but I think the more I learn about it, maybe it doesn't. And I'm wondering, in a situation like that, where you've got a war going on next door, you've probably got limited resources. I bet even getting the Chinooks over there was not easy.
No, they wanted them back pretty quickly.
Yeah. Is it naive to
flood them all over? I mean, the resources that you have, it's like, kind of.
So is it naive to think that you probably still had to fight these battles? Like, that's part of the reason you're there, is to do this?
Yeah, I think so. There were some times that, and it was interesting because in a humanitarian disaster relief, even though I talk about this. I actually wrote a book about this story, and it's how to lead through crisis. And it's called Endgame First. But it talked about the phases of this relationship, but also some of the techniques, because it was this eclectic group. And how do you build a team to be able to, and the idea of, checking your ego at the door? Because here I was, I mean, the U.S. military, as you know, because you've been a part of that, is there's nobody that can operate the scale and speed and adaptability that we have. I mean, helicopters are shot at now, providing relief and shuttling supplies, and tents, shelters, and medicine, and people up the affected areas. C-17s and C-130s, I pick up a phone and say, hey, I need to deliver this. But, I had to orchestrate when I could land at the airfield. Bring in a hospital. I got to have the helicopters back fighting the war, and I got all the National Guard helicopters from all over the United States being disassembled, put together, land at the airfield, and 2 days later they're flying relief missions throughout the affected area of this 100 by 300 kilometer area that was just completely devastated with no access. And you're kind of like, wow. But anyway, here you are as an individual that had all the money, all the toys, all the capacity. I had a staff that knew how to work this, and plus this big CENTCOM staff back in Tampa that was helping me resource all these things. Somewhat an unlimited budget to be able to provide the support that we needed to support the effort of the ambassador. So it was, I could have easily gone, excuse me, I'm in charge because I got everything. But the mindset I think we're taught, in the military, whether it's strict TACON, ACON, and all that kind of stuff. And one Marine general told me, well, there's hand-con and choke-con. But it was the idea of supporting relationships. Yeah. And I quickly realized, supporting the ambassador and the U.S. mission, the military was just one piece of this puzzle. Yeah. When you see this unique interagency and how you come together, is how do we provide all those resources and capabilities to be able to provide the mission of saving lives and being able to focus on what was going on. And so the book Endgame was an interesting one because here now General Abazade and General Doug Lute, both then later ambassadors, come ashore about 3 weeks into it, and we're flowing forces in. And Abazade or Lute kind of poke me and kind of go, hey, Lefevre, we have a bad habit of sending troops places and never getting them out. He says, what's your end game? What's your exit strategy?
Interesting.
I looked at him like, you got to be kidding me. I just got here, boss. Yeah. I mean, by then it was a couple hundred on the ground. They grew to 1,500. And of course, Pakistanis, I'm in areas where it used to be, Taliban training camps up in the Fatah and along the northwest frontier in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and along the line of control at Azad Kashmir, free Kashmir. That's always been a contested area.
Huge.
And he's saying, okay, what's your exit strategy? But it was really prescient in that. And he says, hey, Mike, here's what I want you to do. Provide humanitarian relief and improve U.S.-PAC relations. And so after the initial stages of that 911 moment and understanding those second and third order effects, if you weren't ahead of it, kind of the phases, you could then everything was geared to that. How do I make sure that Pakistan improve that U.S. relations, provide the humanitarian support? But it helped really focus that, hey, we all experience tragedies along our lives and crises, but the idea that they're all going to end. And then the idea that what made this so prevalent is that you get to shape how this is going to end. You get to decide along the way your actions and activities and decisions to be able to, when this ends, you end it in a state where you want it to be. Yeah. And so this idea, and so it was so prescient about how you could do that. And so then everything was geared around that. There were some tough decisions along the way where, making sure that Pakistan was always in the front and which they did a great job, but, they didn't have the resources nor the knowledge that we had to be able to assist. And so it was just fun. It was just kind of like, I love the environment. Here's a clean board. There wasn't really any real good guidance about how to conduct humanitarian assistance. And it says, okay, we're going to put you in charge and we're going to arrange a command and control environment that all these forces from Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, Aussies, NATO are going to be supporting this effort. And it was It's like, holy shit, this is fun.
Well, clearly it works because they bring you back. So you achieve both missions. It sounds like. And if we look at, so you go back in 2008. Obviously, the Bin Laden raid you alluded to, 2011. In that time frame, and I know my dad, if he ever listens to this, he will insist I talk about, because he's beat this into my head, like how important the military is in Pakistan and the core commanders and how much they drive decisions politically and in terms of domestic and foreign policy. And you being the head U.S. military lead had to have been super involved there. Maybe my first question though is, did you ever end up going to Abbottabad?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Several times.
Tell me about this, please.
There's some really funny stories. I mean, Abbottabad
Yeah.
was also a place where we put the French had a forward refueling station there. So as the helicopters, so they didn't always have to come back to Islamabad to refuel. We'd forward refuel and do sling loads as we developed that towards the middle and end of the operation to be able to provide so much supplies. So that was there. Then there was another time when I was the senior rep there, and General Petraeus was CENTCOM commander, and he was asked to talk at Abbottabad. They're basically their West Point. And so that was probably like 2010. And so it's fun. You talk about the PAC Army, then it was General Kiani, and then General Pasha was the DGMO, which was their kind of head of operations, who later became the head of ISI. For some reason, we befriended, but that's where I became very close. The embassy was incredibly close. The ambassador, the chief of station, and myself, kind of with the trifecta and how they played us. And we were such united that it was just so much fun to be able to be a part of that. But one of the keys is one of my philosophies that I always remembered from leadership was, I used to say my command philosophy, my top 3 priorities are relationships, relationships, relationships. You can have them in any order, but those are the top 3. Because it was the relationships that developed. Because ironically, after the earthquake, the guy was rotating out. General Admiral Mullen was the CNO when I did the earthquake relief, now the chairman. And he gets called by Kiani, and we're trying to develop this relationship for the war on terror. And he says, hey, Mike Lefevre knows who we are. He did this great relief effort. He's well respected. We would like him back. And it was almost a Pakistani by name call, how I got sent back to, again, this idea of 1 year thinking, and then 3 years later. But it was those relationships that allowed us to do things and to be able to support what we were doing, training the Frontier Corps, supporting the Air Force. We got them F-16s as a part of a, decent contract, and then boats for the Navy. And I mean, just those experiences, and it's the relationships that why I still get invited back to these strategic dialogues, because of the relationships that break down all the barriers. It's harder to say no when you've developed a relationship. And so that was key. And kind of, I talk about that as well, as you build the trust and the respect. It wasn't that, I became a, but it was trying to interpret how the Pakistanis were. And even after the Bin Laden raid, which they really didn't appreciate. But I was one of the few people they would still talk to because of the relationships involved.
Wow.
To be able to still do the deconfliction along the border, to be able to do other stuff.
You have to.
Get brought back. But, they were kind of interesting times.
If we, in just a sec, if we talk the Bin Laden raid, but just before that, who was the ambassador at the time? It was Crocker the first time, you said, right? And who was it the second time?
Ann Patterson, another just great American, another career diplomat. And then she got relieved by Cameron Munter in the last year that I was there, but she was there for like 3 years. And Ann Patterson, and she's another one that, and her deputy was Jerry Firestein, that went on to Yemen. His assistant, was Elizabeth Richard, that was his deputy in Yemen, and then later went to Lebanon. Ann went on to Cairo and Egypt. I mean, these were unique kind of wartime ambassadors that relished in the circuit of in heavily contested, conflicted areas versus the cocktail circuit. Yeah. But it's just fascinating. Just great leaders and impressive, you get a really respect for the interagency and what each of us brings to the table to really provide incredible.
Especially there. Could you sort of take us through just what where you sat and what happened with the Bin Laden raid?
Yeah. What I can tell you is that
whatever you can tell us. Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that, when it would happen, a very small group, as you can well imagine, really understood that. So we had at the embassy, ability to do stuff. We had some other folks came in, but we set up a kind of a little command center there. So the infamous picture of, the White House in the sit room, we were on the other side of that VTC with Bill McRaven, the White House, and the Director Panetta. And Bill McRaven in theater in Afghanistan, Panetta at Langley, and then the White House. So really fascinating, and I think what people can feel very good about from the times of Eagle Claw, the disaster in Iran, where we had so many, and the development of JSOC and what we did, and the interagency to what occurred at the Bin Laden raid, the incredible resources that were brought to bear of the U.S. government to have an incredibly unique picture and ability to do the pull off that event in secrecy and under the cover of night, undetected to the time that the helicopter, the picture that's when the helicopter settled on the wall, and literally the wheel caught just right, or that thing would have been in flames. And some of the operators that I knew, part of the team, quite well, that were a part of that, and how they were able to respond and conduct the different what they trained for down in North Carolina.
Completely change.
But be a part of that and have the understanding and knowledge and the connectivity and being able to observe and be a part of that was just also another highlight, the kind of, and the professionalism, the idea, what happened, the amount of information, the resources and the planning that went in because of the helicopter crash, how that we had other helicopters, what we had stacked over there, how we exfilled, how we were able to take the body out, the coordination that we had in order to get just an amazing sense of the operation and communication. And then I helped set up some phone calls with the chairman and General Kiani where people were safe to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then the president coming on that night to talk about it. And, so it was really, quite an event to be a part of. Yeah.
And did you genuinely, if you can't answer, don't worry, and we'll just edit this part out. But when, I'm imagining, I guess, I'm trying to even imagine putting myself in your shoes as kind of the lead military counterpart. You've developed this relationship over years with these people. You can imagine they're going to be upset. Do you also have kind of a talking point set for like if this thing goes south or is it, I'm just going to expend all the equity I've built up over time and hope that it turns out okay?
I mean, it was, we built up a lot of trust and a lot of, expertise. The Ray Davis thing caused some chips to be cashed in.
Probably used some equity there. Okay.
Yeah, it was, we had arranged, here is a diplomat that, of course, he's jailed. We have help in settling. We get him, instead of going to the prison, hops in an airplane, we get him to Afghanistan. There was also a reporter, that New York Times reporter that was taken in Afghanistan and brought over. That was probably a couple months before that he's found in Pakistan. And I'm working with Ahmed Pasha, the director of ISI, when he gets out of the compound and makes his way to a ranger station to be able to brought him back to be able to be released. I mean, it was a series of events that always occurs, and the interactions along the border, and the ability that they gave us access to bases as well as the air carters to be able to continue to resupply this landlocked country. Kind of when Mullen he goes, hey, you hero of Pakistan from this war, kind of like we need you there. And in order to win in Afghanistan, we need to win in Pakistan because of being landlocked. At any one time, there was 10,000 trucks on the road in Pakistan, which was the resupply route from the port of Karachi to be able to do it before we opened up the northern routes, which then got closed down because of the Russians. I mean, it was such an interesting geopolitical strategic environment that kind of, four-dimensional chess doesn't even come close to what this was. And then the dynamics of India and Indo-Pak and how we separate the world, and then the sensitivity, Pakistan being a very proud country and their army really running the country, and ISI being a part of that, working with us to be able to round up the biggest terrorists, and at the same time trying to catch us it was just it was the most uncertain, unpredictable environment I think I tell people I've ever operated in. I preferred to go to Afghanistan and Iraq because I knew I was going to a war zone.
It's
and
like
here
clear.
was kind of like this crazy place but just it's fascinating.
What does a team of seasoned veterans from across the interagency, after that successful operation, what happens? Do you go have a drink together? Is it retired? We go to bed? Is this top secret? It can't be shared.
No, it's kind of fascinating. The call that when they got him was just kind of like, wow. And then it was like, okay, now we need to do the sensitive site exploitation on the site. We needed to make sure our folks got out safely. Obviously, by now we made a decision we were going to destroy the helicopter. That was going to bring a lot of notice. Obviously, all the gunfire brought some notice. It's in a compound, as talked about, of Bab N Abad, about a mile from their West Point, a couple miles down the road from a potentially weapons storage facility, 60 kilometers from the capital of Islamabad. I mean, crazy, when you think of the dynamics, getting those folks out and safe. And then obviously the follow on, because of the access that we had in Pakistan and the Carter, were they going to shut that down? How do we get the troops out? How do we ensure the proper disposal of the body that we all read about from the burial at sea? All those dynamics, and how do you keep the coalition together to still be able to do that? And then, as you said, I mean, while we're conducting this, there's still like 40 or 50 operations going on in Afghanistan in a night with the units that were there. And so there was almost a sense of, wow. And then it was, the dynamics afterwards of
just keeps going.
The president's talk. And then the unfortunate thing is, the next morning on the news cycle, it was, talking about the raid and how people helped. And that really embarrassed Pakistan. And so, and if you hurt the pride of the Pakistan army, you hurt the whole country. And so literally, again, like I said, I was one of the few persons they would talk to, but for most cases, I mean, I had a fax. They wouldn't answer the phone. So I'd fax them and says, I need to call because we still have operations going on the border. And they were not happy with us, but they would still talk, and they talked to me. We would do things. And then after about 2 weeks, we thought this was their 911 moment, a real opportunity for them to really understand what was going on. And instead it was kind of like, they called me in, read me the riot act.
That's never fun. Never fun.
No, kind of like, because we had some events before that said, if you invade Pakistan, we're going to throw you out. You're no longer here. And kind of, so, that was the expectation. We were just happy they were still talking to us and allowing us. They greatly restricted our access, but we did talk about the events. And then ironically, many of them wanted to go for walks out of their offices to hear some more of the story.
Interesting. All right.
It's great. It's really fascinating. And the relationships, again, that you build to have candid conversations and hard talks and critical conversations about difficult subjects, kind of trying to figure out how they thought about it, but how we thought about it and what we needed to do. And then working with them to try to build their confidence back up and for them to demonstrate their capabilities.
Nice. Well, I was hoping you'd say you all had a little bit of scotch or something, and then said, all right, let's keep going.
All right. I got back, kind of like, it was in the morning, our morning, when, President finally finished talking, and then, we knew it was going to be game on. Yeah, it was, op tempo there was just, incredible because of that 12-hour cycle almost from DC.
Yeah, it never ends.
You're working in Pakistan, then you got to stay up at night to be able to brief National Security Council and others about the events that went on for the day. So it's an endless cycle. Quite an operation.
You've mentioned all these people that you've met, Crocker, Abazade, you mentioned Casey. I know we're only scratching the surface once you're at your level, and even the foreign dignitaries, Kiani and folks that you may have run into. Is there a particularly memorable encounter you had with someone, whether they were foreign or somebody in the U.S. that just kind of still sticks with you, or a nice one at a dinner party you could throw out?
I think there's so many of those, chances. There's like little unique things that you want to like treasure, little pieces. And then like you asked in the beginning, it's kind of like, seriously? You're like picturing yourself like, I'm at the state dinner, reading a démarche or talking to the president of a country that just went through a coup and how they should treat. You kind of go, who would ever thought that, Mike would be at this, kind of this level and very humbling and, kind of eye-watering, the kind of the opportunities and the events to be a part of, I think is probably the tribute, a lot like you can only carry with you, and many people and, kind of, and the experiences and the opportunities and some of the funny vignettes that would occur or unique things that, trigger your mind about discussions and comical events or unique events that you could share with some of the folks that obviously been a part of that.
How about briefing the president? Like the first time you have to do something at that level, I can't even imagine. I mean, when was that moment for you?
The first one was kind of like VT. Well, in 2005, Vice President Cheney came over, but we were briefing the president, and then had the former presidents actually come to Pakistan to take a look. And so that was kind of, again, very humbling to be in that, and kind of here you were, as a one-star, and I'm leading this great coalition of men and women that are providing assistance, and we're flying them up in these austere areas and seeing the environment and the wonderful support we were getting from Pakistan. But the impact that we were having, and, our helicopters were called, like you, a helicopter pilot, they were called Angels of Mercy. And even though the NGOs would say, well, because we had donor fatigue because of the Aceh, tsunami, and so people were tired. So these NGOs would get on and go, well, if we don't get money, we're not going to be able to get supplies. And, it's kind of like, oh, shit. I had to get on TV. I was on TV probably every day, kind of talking about because we were the only ones capable. The UN helicopters were able to do a little, but it was really the U.S. airlift, rotary air and fixed wing that was saved the day. We carried out an airlift that was overwhelmed. What we did in Berlin to be able to keep these cities that were isolated alive and gone. And it, you kind of sit back and when it sinks in, you kind of go, wow, that was pretty amazing. Yeah, pretty blessed.
Given a lot of the work you do now from a leadership, consulting, advisory perspective, and the book, quite honestly, like leading through crises, who have you learned the most from in your time?
Wow. That's a great question. I had, like everyone, we always have these great mentors along the way. And it's both the good and bad that helps develop you or what you are. And as kind of the military, every 18 months or 2 years or 3 years, you get a new commander or a new senior enlisted, it's kind of like everybody's worried, what it was. But I always looked at it as, here's another individual based on the experiences and what they've shaped and how they approach it. And the idea that when you're in that opportunity to have command and lead and to be able to lead the organization better than when you found it. But I had so many great mentors that taught me so many things and then, tailor them to how my style to be able to operate, that really was the formula of how do you blend that? Because one size doesn't fit all. and how you lead people and how you take care of them. I talk about, it's like the old watchman with the bing ring of keys. And as a leader, knowing that each key, which is the right key for that individual to unlock their potential and to allow those people to flourish and allow them to really excel and shape them, because our time, and how do you help shape them for the future that they'll be in positions to lead and to be able to benefit from your experience. So when I do mentoring, it's along those lines. Here's what I did to screw up.
Yeah.
Here are the things that for me worked, but this is how I was able to approach some of these situations. And again, for that individual, for them to be able to decide what works best for them. Yeah. Again, this idea of strengths and weaknesses for all of us, but probably the most important is how do you deal with this uncertainty and unpredictability? How do you know what those stressors are for you? And so at this Liminal Collective, we did some Red Bull stuff, and we do some stuff with operators and folks, but we put them in environments that are completely foreign to them, to get them to understand what's happening physiologically and psychologically to them that impairs their decision-making under stress. How do they recognize that? How do they control that to be able to be better decision makers?
What's an example of that, sir? Like for an operator, what do you put them in that gives them, if you're allowed to say, I don't know if it's proprietary.
Yeah, but. No, huh? It was a kind of a week-long development, and it was funny. There were some cyber warriors that work at the national level, Air Force and National Guard unit that was doing that. So we had a handful of them. We teach them, kind of keeping, kind of the resiliency people, self-care, self-talk. How do you stay connected and understanding, who you are? But we'd help shape them, give them foundations. We'd talk to them about, shaping what they were. Then we did some pool work in the water. Did some underwater swimming, some breath holding. The next day, we had some folks that actually developed Cirque du Soleil, and we put them up on a stage and put them through some of the things with Cirque du Soleil. And to see them, we had them on heart monitors to watch, and we had some folks in the audience to watch their reaction, and then we had them evolve from a creativity perspective. And an unfounded. Then we took them to the Red Bull facility and put them through some of the things at the Red Bull facility to understand. And then we took them out one morning off the coast of Malibu through the surf, put them in wetsuits and swam them out at like 5 a.m. in the morning to watch the sunrise over LA through kelp beds. But we had them in life preserve. But I mean, it's just kind of those experiences that took them out of what they were accustomed to put them in this whole unique environment to see how their body would react and how they would react to those, evolving developments. Like
very physical.
I'm going to take you off. You're sitting out on your bridge wing of the flagship carrier or LHA. And now I'm going to send you into the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush.
Interesting.
We're kind of like, oh, well, I've trained for that all along my whole naval career.
Wow.
So it's kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned, we joked you'd failed at retirement, but you do a lot of things now that I just very quickly rattled off. What are some of the things right now that you're proud of or excited about that you're engaged in?
Well, I was, probably giving back is probably the best. When I was working for Joint Staff and doing the training, helping future leaders evolve and help them understand the dynamics of the national security environment, like who would have predicted? I came off the carrier, then I'm briefing the president about what's going on in the earthquake and the whole interagency. And here's 3 and 4 stars, and I'm telling them that, well, USAID is in charge, and we don't need those foul weather codes, but we need blankets because it's not culturally sensitive. And so you need to offload this airplane, and I need this supply, and regulating that, well, I need to build this hospital, but at the same time, I need to bring in supplies to be able to support. And here's this lonely 1-star talking to the transportation commander, 4-star, in St. Louis, kind of like, sir, you need to offload that military aircraft, and we need to shape it to have it this load. So it's environments like that to be able to do that. So giving back and helping them understand that, I think was one of the more prouder moments. And then most of the other things was being able to use the great experiences that I had to help shape leadership environments at different organizations, a cybersecurity company that I find myself that was helping the intelligence community in some programs. Then I was at this security company for the last 5 years as CEO, helping to shape it and bring a, develop a culture that allowed the company to grow and excel and support ops. And then we actually got called by some of our high net worth individuals to help evacuate people out of Afghanistan, that we were successful in getting out. And we created a 501c3 called the 188 Foundation of folks that literally the last flight out of Maz Sharif. And it was a KEM Airlines that negotiated with the Taliban, and we had State Department clearances to get them to the IRC in Mexico. But the VP of the Afghan Airlines knew what was going on, and he stuffed the plane full. So it landed in Dubai with like 350 some people on board. When we told everybody in the government it's only 188, and these people are going to walk across the tarmac onto a plane to go to Mexico, they were not happy with us on that one. That was another fun one. But, being involved and have an impact, I think, is probably the key. So I find myself helping in national security, giving back, and then sharing my experiences so that other people can hopefully benefit from my losses and failures. Be able to learn from those.
And even over the next couple of years, is there something that you haven't done that you're trying to scratch an itch on?
Gosh, I don't know. I think it's what gets served up. As you can understand, I kind of love this idea of kind of like, hey, what do you think about this? Well, I'll give it a shot.
Let me try this.
Right now, it's kind of like part-time in this one company I'm doing. I've been a chairman of because of foreign owned, so Ocean Infinity, which is undersea robotics and surveying. But looking at helping, how do we do that? How do we shape? How maybe there's some stuff we can do to help with the undersea cables. I mean, so it's kind of those experiences to build. How do we shape? How do we take this? Adapt this utility to be able to provide this kind of service. So I enjoy that as well. It's kind of like, wow, we had helicopters that were, getting shot at. Now they're providing humanitarian relief, or this hospital designed for combat casualties now providing support to families and children that were part of this devastating earthquake that, were part of the injured. And how do you adapt and how do you think about things and the creativity in mind to be able to do that? So it's kind of fun. And then this high performance thing, this Liminal collective, how do we support people that are, gonna do things and help them train to be better leaders in this environment that's changing very rapidly?
Jealous. And do you do anything when you slow down? I assume you're a big reader. Is that correct? You read a lot, sir?
But I do read. I don't judge. I do a lot of audiobooks. But I like staying active, working out. I do sea kayaking. I'm out in the Puget Sound area right now, and then staying active, bike riding, hiking, being with people, and sharing stories.
Well, just two quick questions before that I ask everybody, just before I let you out of here, if you're still okay with it. One is there anything that you carried with you when you were, I say downrange, but on a ship or, when you were in Pakistan, something that had either sentimental value, something that somebody gave you, good luck charm, or just something you wanted to have on you?
Wow. Great question. I had this saying that, you carry it in your heart. Because it's something that nobody can ever take away from you. So it's those memories and those people that helped shape you, your loved ones, that and the experiences that you always carried with you that was important. I do joke that I had this backpack that it was kind of like my security blanket, I called it.
Yeah.
Anytime that I had it, I kind of survived a lot of stuff. I was like, oh, I'm going to take this with me forever.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, I still do.
Yes, I have one right here. I have one that the zippers, zippers don't work. My wife made me get another one that's right here. So I hear you on that. I hear you.
Yeah. So that was one. Yeah. I mean, it is fun.
No, I love it. And then the last question that I try to ask everybody is just looking back on, 3 decades of service and sacrifice and time away from loved ones and probably losing people along the way and almost certainly near-death experiences. As you look back on that time, would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely. without a doubt.
Yeah.
It really is. It's kind of like, wow, how was I afforded that opportunity and the challenges? And hey, you're going to do this again. And it's kind of like, really? This is great. Okay, look, give it a shot. Like as you know, it in the military, it's like every 2 years or 18 months, you're going on a new assignment, new job you weren't trained for. People talk about imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, exactly.
Like, oh, well, that's kind of cinemaizes my whole career.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's kind of like, what a great opportunity and challenges, and just so fortunate.
And then I should have asked at the beginning, sir, what weight class did you wrestle at? Were you like a state champ? What were you, like 171?
Yeah, I was in New Jersey. I went to states, was regional champ. Didn't do too well in states. And then, but at the Naval Academy, I wrestled 126 pounds.
126? Really?
Yeah,
were you having to cut or no?
Oh, yeah. I was probably in the off season. I was probably in the 140, 150 range through college. I'm lucky. I feel good at like 160, 160, 165. And it's kind of like, I still need to lose some weight, but life changes.
Right. And then we'll get you out on this. Did you ever have to take Glenn Korn down one time? Like, hey, you're talking too much.
Glenn was always, some of the Nerf basketball sometimes got to be a physical game.
Okay.
Kind of like, blocking shots and so forth. There might have been some physical contact during those games in the embassy.
Hey, sir, thank you so much. This was really enjoyable. I hope actually maybe one day we can get you back on just to talk about what's going on in the world in these places that you travel to and still keep up on. But genuinely, thanks for your service and spending time with us.
No, thank you. This was really a lot of fun.
Hope you enjoyed that combat story. First time with an admiral on here, which is pretty cool. Had no idea what to expect, and really didn't think that the idea of the work that he did in Pakistan for the earthquake would be so meaningful to him until hearing that story. And also, was amazed to hear about his experiences with the Bin Laden raid, being on that side of the world, that side of the border in Pakistan, having gone to Abbottabad many times before, and what that must have felt like. And then even the reference to the French, who were about a couple miles away from Bin Laden for so long. That was interesting to hear. I had no idea we had a coalition presence that close, but it must have been fascinating, the people he's met along the way. Thank you so much for sticking it out with us. As always, you can check out our newsletter at combatstory.com/newsletter. And if you want to support the show, we've got a property, if you're looking for a killer vacation down in Florida near some of the nicest beaches in the world. You can check it out at combatstory.com/vacation. That money can definitely help us keep going here. So thank you so much for staying tuned this long. And wherever you are in the world, hope you have a great rest of your week, weekend, and as always, stay safe.